What was your scariest something's not right moment? I was working on a radio system in the local water tower of a pretty remote outback town. It was a beautiful late spring day in October when I got there, but after about 2 hours the bird noises stopped. The breeze stopped. I took my equipment out of standby and flagged it as live test because I had the weirdest feeling I didn't have time to fully test it and went outside to sit in the car. About 90 seconds later there was a direct lightning strike on the tower I'd just left. It was the highest point in 200 kilometers. It was literally the loudest thing I'd ever heard. Ever. I was walking to school in middle school and this lady with a car pulled over next to me and called me Linda. That's not my name, but was close enough I looked up. She apologized and explained she thought I was her grandkid. Then she offered me a ride to school. Except that I was already standing on the school grounds. I had a half-block walk before I needed to turn to walk into the building. When I said no she tried to demand I get into the car. I said no thanks and took off running. It occurred to me much later that she probably had no intention of dropping me off at school. I was living about 5 hours away from my parents and spent Easter with them. The plan was to take Monday off work and drive back that day. But for some reason, I decided to go back on Sunday night. Woke up about 3 to a weird noise and hit the touch lamp next to my bed. It made a loud popping sound and turned off. Thinking, something isn't right here. I got up and grabbed the bedroom door handle. It was so hot that I immediately pulled my hand back. As it turned out, my entire apartment was in flames. My living room caught fire from a faulty electric outlet and it spread to the dining room by the time I got up. The only ways out were through the living room to the front door or through the dining room and kitchen to the back door. I used whatever strength I had to shove my headboard away from the window, broke the window out with my glass, and just screamed. My landlord was letting a guy illegally live in a storage room. He heard me and ran right down the block to the fire station. They actually got me through the window and then put out the fire. I was hours away from my family. Had no money or ID, lost my cell phone and car keys in the fire, and it was only like 4 a.m. I ended up losing pretty much everything. My neighbor was nice enough to let me shower at her place and give me some clothes until my parents made the drive. Late at night, I was sitting in my car waiting for my boyfriend to finish his shift. A guy walks past and we make eye contact. I feel this sense of danger but figure I'm overreacting. A few minutes pass and the fear won't go away. I finally decide to move my car away from the edge of the parking lot to the front of the restaurant in the customer parking area. I start up my car and just as I'm putting it into drive, the guy rushes out from behind and tries to yank open my door, pulling on it really hard. I hit the gas and he trails me for a second, then hits my window with a rock. I keep going and he throws the rock at me then runs away. I was shaking so badly I could barely steer. Pretty sure he was sneaking up on me just as I decided to start my engine. I was driving past a small park close to my home when I noticed 2 older couples on the sidewalk looking into the park. The women seemed distraught and the men were trying to calm them down from the looks of things. I slowed down a bit and for a second I debated stopping to see if everything was alright, but decided against it and kept on driving. The following day I found out a young person from the area had hung themselves from a tree in the park and I assumed those 2 elderly couples were the unfortunate ones to make the discovery. I was home alone and someone rang my bell door. It was dark and I could see a person, but I was unable to see his face, only like a shadow. I didn't open the door because he never answered so I went back to playing. However, my dog would look straight at the door like he knows something was not right. After like 2 hours my parents arrived and told me there are 2 police cars on our street. Apparently, that person was a burglar and he knocked out one of my neighbors and stole from his house. This happened 2 years ago but I still feel unsafe because I am probably the only one that was able to see his face. It wasn't me that noticed something's not right. Once a woman came up to me on a train that I had gotten on and said I just wanted you to know that man there is following you and he was. He followed me, in a quiet way, when I changed trains and I ended up asking a cop to walk me home. It was one of the creepiest experiences of my life. In hindsight I shouldn't even have gone home. I'm pretty sure he stopped following me when I spoke with the police officer. But still, I was about 16 to 17, driving back to my place from a 7 to 11 in my mom's car with a friend. The streets were deserted as it was middle of the night around 2 a.m. We pulled up to this stoplight, and a motorcycle with a pillion on the back pulled up unnecessarily close to our car's passenger side window. I had a bad feeling but ultimately did nothing and proceeded to chat with my friend while waiting for the green light. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the pillion pulling a rod or hammer from his backpack and starts to wind up. I peeled the fuck out of there real fast Lamau. Managed to lose the bike and got home safe. Friend didn't even know what was going on until we reached my place. My dad had just passed from a long battle with cancer, and towards the end my mom had been acting odd. She hadn't been caring for him towards the end. I ended up leaving work to do so, and she didn't really seem to be mourning him, and they had had a reasonably good relationship. A couple of days after he passed, I was going through his stuff and I noticed it was 10 a.m. and my mom wasn't up. I let her be. 11, 12, 1, 2, 3 o'clock. Finally I was starting to think maybe something was up. She had never stayed in bed that late ever. So I opened her door. I found her on all fours with her chest on a stool kneeling in a fairly large pile of urine and feces. I'm not sure how she got on the floor. I feel like I would have heard her fall. After I got her cleaned up and stuff, I asked her what the deal was, and she told me she didn't have the strength to get up, nor the presence of mind to yell for help. Ended up taking her to the ER, and that was the day I figured out I wouldn't be going back to work, because I was going to spend the next few years taking care of my now terminally ill mother. I got home from work, and as soon as I stepped out of my car something felt off. My upstairs neighbor left his dog out, which wasn't super uncommon, but she was acting strange, which just added to my weird intuition. Normally she's super excited to greet you, but this time she just sat by his door. About 20 minutes pass and I can't shake the feeling. I decide to go to his door and see if he wants to come down for a drink. As I approach, I notice his dog made it inside, but now she's barking nonstop. I knock and I knock until I'm pounding on his door. I jiggle the handle and it's locked. I run down and through my house to a back stairwell that connects our residences. I open the door to his apartment and he's overdosing on Percocet, convulsing on the ground, struggling to breathe. EMS said if they had been called 10 minutes later he might not have survived. Edit, didn't think this would get much attention. So here's a bonus story. I moved into the house where this happened about 2 years ago. In the same upstairs residence there was an older gentleman who lived there before my buddy and his dog. Roughly 3 weeks after moving in I stopped seeing my elderly neighbor. He was a bit of a homebody. Didn't have internet or even a smartphone. Very simple guy who just enjoyed the company of some scotch and his blues records. Weeks go by and I notice he hasn't been playing his records and it's been awfully quiet. But I didn't think much of this because I wasn't well acquainted with the guy, so I didn't really know his schedule/habits. Around week 3 or 4, this foul stench starts to creep throughout my home. I light candles. I hose my house with Febreze to no avail. One day I come home and the smell is unbearable. And then it hits me. This is the smell of a dead body. I call my landlord, who comes over in a hurry. As soon as he is introduced to the smell he goes white. We rush to his front door, which he unlocks, considering this to be extreme circumstances, and sure enough my former neighbor is dead, rotting on the floor. He had been there for so long his blood had soaked into the floor and was seeping into my bathroom ceiling. You could see it inside the light fixtures. I've got 2 of them. Both shook me up. I worked as a bouncer in Missouri and about midnight one night I got sent to Walmart for some things. Driving down 50 I caught a glimpse of a figure on the side of the road. Ghostly corner of your eye kind of thing. I pulled over and a young woman approached my passenger door. She was hyperventilating almost and really freaked out. I couldn't understand her, so I just told her to get in my truck. As we sat there for a moment she tried to talk. Just then a van pulled up behind me, still on the side of Highway 50, and a man jumped out and approached the passenger side window that was still down. He grabbed the girl and started cussing me. About half a second goes by before I collect myself and in my biggest voice calmly explain he needs to back off and she's not leaving my truck. I told him I have no idea what's going on, but I'm taking her wherever she wants to go. We talked on the way to the hospital. She was from out of state. Some guy she met through a friend assaulted her and drug her out to a field. She was beaten until she played dead. She escaped from the back of the van when they stopped for gas. I don't usually stop for strangers at midnight, but something in my gut made me slam on my brakes for that woman. Other Missouri story. Still bouncing. I used to drive girls for private shows. One girl decided to schedule her own show and make some money without having to tip me, I guess. Guys wouldn't give her the address for the party, just told them to meet them at a closed gas station off of 50. On the way there she got nervous and called me. I was in bed half asleep, but after hearing her I tried to talk her into just turning around. She insisted on meeting the guys because she needed the money. Made some comment about if I don't go with her it'll be my fault when she's missing and on the news. So I met her at the empty gas station. The whole scene made me nervous, especially because they weren't expecting me, and assholes get stupid when spooked. We sat for 10 minutes while we waited. The whole time I tried to convince her to go home. 3 vehicles rolled up with several guys in them. They were all drunk/fucked up. She jumped out the car to be friendly, but the moment I stepped out and they saw me they started cussing and hollering and rolled out in a hurry. I'm not the toughest idiot. I just don't think they expected a witness. Avoid Highway 50. I video called my sister an hour after she had a baby. She picked up and just said I don't feel good. But something was bone-chillingly off about it. An hour later she was hemorrhaging and all her stats were in a free fall. Turns out she had a major complication that the doctors missed. The scariest time of my life. She spent 3 weeks in ICU but eventually made a full recovery and the baby was healthy and is currently climbing on me as we enjoy Christmas together. That was 2 years ago, but I still remember the exact look in her eye when she said I don't feel good. Gives me chills even today. When I was about 19 I was waiting for my then boyfriend to get off of work at the mall. Standing outside near the employee entrance. It was close to 10 p.m. and the mall had already closed, so the parking lot was fairly empty. This car drove up to the curb, probably 15 feet from where I was standing at the wall, and the window rolled down. The driver was the only person in the car and he asked if I knew how to get to X road. That road was the one visible from where I was standing, so I pointed at it and told him the exit onto that road was right across the way. He kept looking at me and said, I'm having trouble hearing you. So I walked 5 feet closer and shouted it at him. He said, "Could you show me?" I'm terrible with directions. I immediately decided this man just wanted me to either get close enough to grab or to get into his car, and just pointed to the road and said, "Drive that way, you can't miss it," and walked right into the employee entrance to wait for my boyfriend instead. I wasn't supposed to be in there, but figured getting yelled at by security was way better than getting kidnapped by a guy in his 40s. It's a long story, but I caught some creepy guy trying to expose himself to my 11-year-old daughter. It was a gut feeling to go check on her. I was in another part of a store and walked up just in time. Always follow your instincts and trust your gut. Told this story a few times, but why not once more? Text my friend Katie the night before and never got a response, which was unlike her. I had a gut feeling something was wrong based on that. Later in the day, my other friend said we needed to talk, and I instantly knew my friend was dead. She had died in a car accident the night I texted her, and I knew deep down before anyone told me. Miss you, Katie. R.I.P. I was home from college visiting my parents' house for the weekend. My sister has taken my old bedroom and I was sleeping in the guest room next to it. I was on my way out and had absolutely no reason to go into her room, but something made me peek in there last minute. My sister's old school portable space heater was left on and had tipped over, laying on top of a cardboard box. I was the last one to leave the house that day. My whole house could have burned down with all our pets in it if I hadn't gone in her room. Another fire situation that almost happened. I was back at school and was going to just crash at my boyfriend's apartment one night. I couldn't shake this weird feeling of needing to go home. Even though it was late and cold out, I trekked back to my place. When I got inside, all my roommates were already sleeping, but I noticed the stove light letting you know the burners were warm was on. I went to go check it out and realized my roommate accidentally left the stove top burner on low and there was a kitchen towel left on top of it. SMH, person facebombing, /U200D email sign. I woke up and went down my stairs to my alarm ringing. I do this to force me to get out of bed, but as I did so I saw my dish rack was just a strange place and thought my father had moved it. So I went back upstairs to get ready for school, and as my dad goes down he sees our garage door is open with our car, TV, and other things stolen while we were sleeping. They had moved the dish rack to get in the window we leave open for the cats. I had nightmares of people coming into my house for weeks. I took a class on, among other things, lighting in a theater. One day I was using a single-person lift to put myself 20 meters above the floor to change one tiny thing on one light. As I raised the lift closer to the light I had this feeling, and then it got progressively worse. Literally every single safety thing that could be wrong on this very heavy light 20 meters above the crossroads of multiple walkways was wrong, and about as wrong as it could be. It is a miracle this light hasn't fallen off and killed someone yet, and it was about to. Moreover, whatever idiot managed to screw it up this badly, who had also somehow been competent enough to be certified to use a 2-person lift, even though I saw every single person in a 45-person class of predominantly 14-year-olds do a better job on a light the first time they ever touched one, also managed to touch the power coupling to the crazy hot light and make it stay there, and the power coupling was melted and somehow still functional, and it's a miracle the entire auditorium hadn't burned down whenever this idiot did this. It was extremely scary to me, as I've been doing extracurriculars in that auditorium for the past 9 years, and I don't think this light had been touched in 9 years, so every one of the thousands of times I had used that path my life had been in danger. Well, I fixed the light so it's safe now and had every single other light in the auditorium checked, so it wouldn't be possible for another light done this badly to continue like this. Every other light in the auditorium was perfectly fine. My wife and I moved into our house last year, just weeks before the lockdown started. We got all of our stuff out of the moving trucking and into the house by 8 p.m. We decided to sleep on the couch, and no more than 5 minutes after lying down someone starts ringing our doorbell and pounding on the door like crazy. Remember, we literally just moved in, so we didn't know anyone. I get up to check the door, kind of freaked out by the urgency of whoever was knocking. No one was there, just darkness outside. I looked down the street to see if it was some kids or something, but no one was there, and we never found out who it was or what they wanted. I was a teenager around 15 babysitting 4 younger cousins. Eldest was about 8. I was watching TV in the living room when there was a knock at the door. It was late and I knew it was odd. I approached the door with a hello. A male answered and asked if someone random was there. I said no. They then said, "Can you open the door? I need a light for a cigarette." I replied no again. I walked back into the living room and saw 2 faces trying to look down the side of the curtains. Then they started knocking again. I walked into the kitchen to arm myself. As I walked in there was already someone half inside and another behind him. I went into protective mode, thinking I won't let them get to the children. I picked up a large knife on the bench and charged towards them. They stumbled and ran off. Shaking, I picked up my cell phone. Knocking was still coming from the front door, asking to be let in. I called the police on my mobile. I explained I have 4 children in the house and there's 4 people trying to break in. They told me to remain calm and go somewhere safe with the children. A bathroom I could lock until the police arrived. I shut the back entrance and returned to the front. I looked out the side of the window and they were stood menacingly at bottom of the garden whilst I was on the phone to the police. The police came with helicopters and police dogs. They were never caught. Roughly 2 years ago at around midnight I'd take my dog outside and something felt off. Now I live in an area that's not quite as country and out of the way as it used to be. Towns expanding, new housing developments had recently gone up, so a lot of animals had less trees to roam in and some had been displaced. Deer come into people's yards more, a screech owl took up residence somewhere nearby, that kind of thing. My dog, she likes to walk all the way to the edge of the yard and walk the edge to find a spot roughly 30 feet or so from the front door. We are about halfway there and something seemed wrong. It wasn't until I got to the edge of the yard that I realized it was dead silent. No crickets, no owls, no coyotes in the distance, nothing. As I'm realizing this, I can feel my heart rate picking up because something is watching us. Have you ever been able to feel predatory intent? There's something in the back of our brains left over from before we conquered the night that feels danger, and it was screaming at me. That was bad enough, but at the same time I could see my dog reacting as well. Her gaze was locked in a direction, her hackles were up. I didn't know golden retrievers could look so disturbed and threatened. When I finally got her moving, we ran for the door. I don't really remember making the decision to run or the moment between starting to moving and opening the door, but I don't think I've ever closed the distance as fast before or since. For months when we went out at night, my dog wouldn't go much more than 5 feet past our sidewalk. We got a fence up months later for our backyard and she wouldn't go outside by herself for months. She still clearly doesn't like it. I know what it's like to be around coyotes in that situation. Neither one of us ever felt particularly threatened by coyotes being nearby, so I can tell you it wasn't a coyote or even a group of them. I never saw it, but it felt larger and more dangerous than a coyote. Never before or since have I felt this presence, this feeling that screamed danger. I have no idea what it is, and frankly I'm grateful I never had to find out. Just a few days ago, I started seeing stars and felt really woozy. I flopped all the way downstairs to get help from my mom. Apparently I was pale, and while my speech wasn't slurred, my mom said it was garbled. I was sweating buckets and the whole attack peaked with me losing my vision for a moment. Anyone ever heard of this? It's happened maybe twice before and I have no clue what it was. In early high school, my best friend and I went to a party. He's black, just hanging out, and a bunch of white guys roll into this party and ask who the N is. H flashes me a look and things were going well for me, but the look was impossible to second guess and we got out of there. Those kids found an Asian girl to brutalize for no reason other than being different. We dodged a bullet. That poor girl didn't, and we both feel a little guilt for that over a decade later. Watching the water leave the harbor. I went to a friend's house for a party in the before times. A few years ago, she had another friend. We'll call her Grace. Grace had brought this man with her to the party and everyone was fawning over him. He was apparently a somewhat well-known local artist. I took one look at him and got a seriously unnerved feeling. I couldn't explain why at the time, but his eyes absolutely freaked me out. No emotion, just cold, extremely off-putting. So I tell my friend that this dude is freaking me out, but I can't explain why. She tells me I am being sensitive. This guy is a local gem. Yada yada. So I suck it up and start trying to interact. It was a very small party. Within maybe 5 minutes, this guy has asked me and my friend, as well as Grace, to go on a road trip to a remote waterfall in Montana with him. It's a spiritual experience, he says. I go there all the time. I bring people up there, obviously. I declined his offer. He spent several minutes trying to convince me, but ultimately, nobody wanted to go to Montana. My friend worked a lot, and Grace was busy with something she couldn't miss, so he dropped it. Grace continued seeing this guy, and out of nowhere he flipped a switch and started beating her. She broke it off with him and he would drive in circles around her apartment, calling her and leaving messages that he was going to kill her. She had to call the police and have him detained and moved to another city overnight to get away from him. I've never been more sorry to be right. Thankfully, Grace is happy and safe now. Accepted a ride home from a male friend. Small town. Everyone knows everyone. Boyfriend left the party early. He said he would be happy to take me home and I thought nothing of it whatsoever. Hours later and I am very drunk. He starts driving me home. I am playing with the radio and chatting a mile a minute. Sometimes goes by. Was a 35-minute trip home, and it occurs to me he had stopped talking. Something came over me and my senses were on high alert. I was suddenly clear-headed. Adrenaline? I noticed we were on a rural road, lived in the country. All rural roads, but this was certainly not our direct route home. And then I looked at his face. He was not there. He was up in his headspace and I just felt terror. It is hard to explain it, but maybe this is some sort of self-defense that came upon me because I knew I was in danger. It was so unexpected. I grew up with this guy, knew him well. At this moment I just began talking to him, calling him by name, bringing up our mutual friends, making small talk, being as light-hearted and kind as I could muster. Forced him to look at me, and all I can describe is that I brought him out of whatever evil had been planning. Now I am much older. I often think about him and I wonder if he has done bad things in his life. I looked him up on FB and saw he is married. But much later in life, That automatic alert to danger was a sensation I will never forget. It is not as if I was questioning him or had any fear for any reason until a sixth sense just rang the alarm. If you have ever experienced it, this will be familiar to you.